Good evening. Today, you are being drafted into the armies of World War I to experience life in the trenches. If this little midnight field trip teaches you something, please toss a subscribe if you haven't already done it. And tell me in the comments what part of the world you are from, so the rest of the world can wish you a good night's sleep. I hope you truly love the stories I share with you all here. Now, turn down the lights, draw the curtains shut, slide into your sheets, and let's begin. You wake to the sound of the world tearing paper. It's dawn, again, because time here is a loop with a whistle. And you are horizontal in what could generously be called a bed, and more accurately be termed an experimental dampness experience. The core tension? You are alive inside a ditch built by committee, and everything in the universe is trying to fix that oversight. Artillery, weather, bureaucracy, trench rats with gym memberships, and your own feet rebelling like disgruntled employees. Picture a modern, open-plan office, except the plan is, don't die. The coffee is tea-flavored with smoke and fear, and your manager is the horizon. HR offers you 3 benefits: a rifle, a shovel, and a long-term relationship with mud. You don't get healthcare, you get hope. Hope is the company culture. Time and place. Western Front, 1914 to whenever you stop counting, because calendars are for people with roofs. The cast is multinational. The vibe is industrial age meets medieval moat. And the sensory package is a subscription box labeled soggy, smell. A potion of wet wool, coal smoke, mouldering wood, tinned beef that died badly, disinfectant with big dreams, and latrine that has seen things. Sound, the constant frisbee whine of shrapnel, the thud of shells like the sky dropping bowling balls, mumbled curses, whistled orders, and the sharp little cough of a rifle that disagrees with your head being above the parapet. Taste, tea, cigarettes, bread that has seen a winter, and that one stew tin called makanokyi, which, technically speaking, counted as food. If your definition of food includes emotional challenges. Touch, everything is some version of wet, clammy, gritty, or cold, like living inside a handshake you can't escape. Sight, grey, brown, then sudden green when the gas comes rolling like an accountant with a vendetta. You are wearing a uniform built on the revolutionary design principles of it exists and it will itch. On your head, a steel hat shaped like an upside-down frying pan, because the technical term for shrapnel is gravity with ambition. Around your legs, puttees. Wool strips wound just so, which is to say soon you will be hosting a small ecosystem in your socks. The trench itself is a Nobel-winning installation in the art of not being seen. There's a frontline trench where you live like a mole with anxiety, a support trench for moles who need a break, and communication trenches, which are the hallways of your new underground apartment complex, where the neighbors are artillery batteries and the HOA is always yelling. The architecture is militarized garden design, parapet in front, parados in back, duckboards below, so you don't drown as a lifestyle choice, sandbags stacked like pastry for giants, and dugouts carved into the side for sleeping, planning, and pretending you can still smell springtime. You stand to at dawn and dusk, because generals and mosquitoes agree that those are the best times to do crimes. Stand to is ritual. You and the lads line up along the fire step, rifles loaded, bayonets fixed. Eyes like saucers, because the light does tricks, and also because the last time you blinked, the Germans moved a machine gun as a treat. Officers pace with the grave intensity of people paid not to sit, clutching whistles and maps. Someone mumbles a prayer, someone else mumbles about socks, and someone, always, somewhere, coughs in the kind of way that suggests an intimate correspondence with trench fever. Breakfast is tea strong enough to file paperwork and bread that doubles as personal armor. Maybe you get jam, maybe you get bully beef, which is beef that has seen things and reacted poorly. You eat on the fire step like it's a cafe with a strict bullet policy. If you are lucky, a mailbag arrives, and with it the entire plot of your beating heart. A letter from home, a photograph with smudged smiles, a cookie, now geologic in texture. The letters are censored, of course, because nothing says morale like black bars over nouns, but you read between the lines and build a house there. If you're extra lucky, the rum ration materializes, sanctioned behavior, mind you, and the trench briefly becomes a toast to not being dead. The toast itself is something like, to mud, because again, that's the only constant. HR, rifle, shovel, mud. We will not stop reminding you. Mechanics now, how it worked, step by, bureaucratic step. You do sentry duty, where your job is to stare into a fog bank and determine if that shape is a bush or a helmet or your own desire for a bed. You run fatigue parties, a phrase which says the quiet part out loud. Fatigue party tasks, stacking sandbags, bailing water, laying duckboards, hauling wire, fixing parapets, and escorting the rations like they're a visiting dignitary. If High Command decides today is a good day for cartography, a wiring party crawls into no man's land at night to set barbed wire. Quiet as rumor, slow as regret. If High Command thinks today is a good day to meet the neighbors, a trench raid forms up, faces blackened, knives in teeth or not. Because dentists exist, a pocketful of Mills bombs and the noble intention of bringing back a prisoner and his secrets. The rifle is your toothbrush. You clean it because jammed equals dead. You name it because companionship is scarce, and statistically rifles are better listeners than lieutenants. The bayonet is a long, pointy lesson in physics and regret. Grenades start as jam tins with creative shrapnel bolts, bits of wire, a summary of your feelings, and slowly become standardized into the Mills bomb. A neat little pineapple that, when used properly, turns time into sound. Trench mortars, lovingly nicknamed to suggest a sense of humor, is still legally allowed. Lob small bombs into the next ditch over, where men exactly like you are also wondering why their toes smell like compost. Machine guns are the gods of this new world. The vicar's on your side chatters like a typewriter, writing the same sentence forever. The enemy's does the same. Between you, a manuscript of steel. Communication is a telephone that resents being shelled, a runner who writes his will in his eyes, a pigeon that does not know what the word hero means but proves it anyway. Artillery is a weather system. The big guns speak in dialects, the high sudden cough of a whiz-bang, the moaning approach of a larger shell that wants to be a character in your memoir. The dull thunder of the heavy stuff that takes a while to arrive and then takes a piece of map with it. You learn to read the sky, not for rain but for trajectories, to count the seconds between scream and thump like a lottery where the prize is still being here. Gas announces itself like a rumor with a smell, chlorine with its pool party in hell vibe, phosgene pretending to be grass and then not. Mustard gas, which is less a gas and more an angry cousin that lingers on fabric and friendship. The gong or rattle or shout goes up, gas, and you dive into your mask like it's a new religion. Early masks are flannel hoods with eye windows, the kind of thing a serious baker would wear if the bread were adversarial. Later, the small box respirator is an improvement. In the same way, a bigger bucket is an improvement when your house is the Titanic. You breathe through canvas and chemical hope, and always, what do you have? Your rifle, your shovel, and your intimacy with mud, prayer beads of modernity. Hygiene is a conspiracy. Lice infest everything with the zeal of new management. They call them chats, which sounds friendly until you discover that delousing is a full-time itch with a side gig in misery. Fires are built in biscuit tins so you can singe the seams of your underclothes and listen to the pleasing pop of your tiny adversaries exploding like punctuation. Flea circus with bonus existentialism. Rats evolve into colleagues. They are big, they are bold. They are convinced that your bread is community bread, and indeed, the rats believe in sharing. At night you feel them patter across your blanket with the unearned confidence of absentee landlords. Some men cook them because protein is protein and the menu is things we have. You swear vengeance, and then you swear you heard one laugh. Feet. We must discuss your feet because your feet would like to file a complaint. Trench foot is an HR investigation into your lower extremities. The mechanism, wet, cold, compression, time, add them up, and you get a limb that decides to become a museum exhibit. The cure? Dry socks, whale oil rubbed on like anointing oil for skeptics, and moving, futilely, incessantly, like you're trying to outpace the climate. You carry spare socks in your pocket where your dreams used to be. You swap them out like playing cards and whisper small words of apology to your toes. High command declares that dryness is patriotic. You nod, because what else is there? And you picture your funeral conducted by a puddle. Above, planes drone like nosy bees. Observers in baskets attached to kite balloons note with scholarly interest that your trench line looks like a badly sewn scar. Artillery corrects itself by killing the trees first and the birds later. Somewhere behind the lines, a chaplain pens a sermon about courage and a quartermaster pens a receipt about blankets. The economy of war is a ledger of wool and metal and silence. You learn to budget your cigarettes, your matches, your patience, your jokes. Especially your jokes. Gallows humor is the only currency that never devalues. You tell stories of the estaminet back in the village where beer is warm and the woman behind the counter calls everyone mon petit, and the stew is not great, but it is not here. You tell stories of leave that may come, where you will step into a real bath, like a crowned head of Europe, and sit in water not trying to unionize. You tell stories of home in a voice that tries not to tremble. Religion in the trench is what fits in a pocket. Rosaries click, psalms mutter, amulets rattle. There are street Christophers and lucky coins, and rabbit feet, and the letter in your breast pocket that you haven't opened yet, because unopened things feel immortal. Chaplains appear in the duckboards with boots too clean and handshakes too warm, and they kneel by the wounded with the practiced tenderness of men who know that sometimes the only sacrament is presence. You do not discuss theology as doctrine. You discuss God as if he were an officer with inexplicable orders. Maybe he sees the map, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he is taking leave in Paris and will return Monday with revised objectives. You hedge your bets with whispered oaths, crossed fingers, and the occasional swig from a bottle labelled medicinal. Social order is geometry. Officers in their dugouts have wooden tables, enamel mugs, a map pinned to the wall with the weight of too many lines on it, and a candle that smells like melted church. Enlisted men have the floor, which is actually the earth, which is actually the reason you know the exact temperature of your own breath. But hierarchy here is a strange beast. The lieutenant will blow the whistle, and go over first because the regulation says so, and he does. And sometimes he comes back, and sometimes he does not. And the men follow anyway because he did. The sergeant is the state. He knows who needs a kick and who needs a kind word and which is actually which. He is the difference between an order and a suggestion when the sky is italicized by flares. And you, if you were the kind of person who enjoyed clear job descriptions, surprises. Your job is war. Your role is human. Your key performance indicators are breathing, listening, and not losing your mind. The battles are bright ideas with muddy endings. The plan, you go over the top at 0 hour, your boots on a ladder, your heart doing percussion, your hands remembering every pocket and strap, and last-minute prayer. Officers raise whistles like small silver tridents. The sound is shrill and mythic because it is summoning you out of the earth. Artillery lays down a creeping barrage, which sounds like a nature documentary, but is actually a high-speed curtain of metal that you chase across a field as if the apocalypse were a parade float and you were a dedicated fan. The enemy has machine guns arranged like VIP seating, and they have put a lot of thought into angles. You move in a line because geometry ranks above terror in this moment. Men fall, and the line tries not to notice because noticing is rude when your job is forward. You reach the enemy trench, sometimes, and you discover that their mud is weirdly familiar. There are boards and sandbags and signs with names like Fritz's Folly and Suicide Corner, which imply that the enemy is also developing coping mechanisms. You throw a grenade, you shout, you trip, you find yourself in a debt you didn't sign for. This one, this man, this moment. Edge cases and absurdities, because history knows how to do farce in a bad suit. Tunneling companies dig under the lines to plant mines the size of small policies. Men in darkness, listening for the enemy's picks through earth. The whole front like a row of volcanoes considering job offers. You read about Messines later and pretend you are not impressed by the geologic scale of the bang. Flamethrowers appear like special effects no one asked for. Shotguns show up and the enemy writes formal letters of complaint about their unsporting nature, as if there were a rule book somewhere with a gold leaf title. Appropriate calamities. Tanks trundle in 1916, metal rhinos with indigestion breaking barbed wire like grudges. They stall, they smoke, they frighten horses and people, but they also suggest that the future arrives one awkward machine at a time. And in winter 1914, a miracle disguised as awkwardness, the Christmas truce, where men sing the same songs in different languages and exchange gifts such as cigarettes, buttons, or the human face briefly unarmored. You kick a football, perform poorly, and for 15 minutes, football is the point of Europe. Then whistles, then apologies to the gods of sanity, then back to work, health and its enemies. There's trench fever, relayed via lice, like a knock-knock joke, where the punchline is, bed rest denied. There's dysentery, the microbe that moonlights as a social critic, reminding you that latrines are not optional. There's shell shock, which is the term used when the mind tries to rewire itself under bombardment. Some men stutter, some stare, some shake. Some cannot cross an open space without feeling the universe peel back. The compassionate respond with rest, the less so with lectures. Field punishment number 1 exists, which is a dramatic way of saying tie a man to a wheel as an example. A great system if your objective is moral ambiguity. Executions happen, though not as many as the myths suggest, and they echo through letters home as official language trying to kill pain with passive voice. Stretcher bearers are your saints. They leave cover on purpose, thread through shell holes, stabilize, lift, and return with a human being who was an adjective 4 minutes ago. Dressing stations smell like carbolic and prayers. Casualty clearing stations look like ambition and grief sharing a canvas. You learn that courage is not a roar. It's often a routine, and sometimes it's tea with a shiver in the hand. Food, glorious-ish food, bully beef and hardtack are your new personality traits. Makanoki stew has turnips in it that could be used as signage. You supplement the menu with anything that volunteers to be edible. Sardines, jam, the occasional chicken that didn't read the posted notices about military zones. Tea is the sacrament. Tea happens under bombardment, in rain, on birthdays, during funerals of friends. The fire is a small rebellion. The cup is a thesis. Sugar is morale you can stir. The cook, a magician with limited spells, conjures soups where the main ingredient is optimism. On rare days, fresh bread arrives, hot from behind the lines, and for 60 seconds the sun appears. Sex, scandals, and the human condition sneak in via furlough and rumour. Behind the lines, regulated brothels are a thing, because nothing says modern state like managing intimacy with paperwork. Condoms are issued with the same sense of cheer as socks. Please use responsibly and return safely. Venereal disease, the phrase that wears a tie to work, gets tracked with charts, because charts are the real religion of bureaucracies. Men boast, men lie, men choose not to. Men write letters to sweethearts with the careful penmanship of a man walking through a field of glass. Affairs exist because humans are not libraries, and loneliness is a strategist. But if you want the real scandal, it's this. You find tenderness in places tenderness shouldn't survive. A hand on a shoulder. A shared cigarette in a flooded traverse. A joke that lands. A nickname that sticks. A letter read aloud for a man who cannot read. That's intimacy, and it is completely out of regulations. Culture develops like moss on stone. Trench newspapers appear, printed on anything that will take ink, full of poems, jokes, cartoons of officers with chins like architecture, and weather reports that are just the word wet, repeated until it becomes confession. Songs, Mademoiselle from Armentières, bawdy, repetitive, weirdly comforting, the chorus like a handrail in a stairwell you don't trust. You invent slang as a weapon against meaning. Blighty becomes paradise. Napoo means done. Jerry is the familiar name for a man you don't know. You carve trench art from shell casings and chalk, making vases, rings, crosses, objects that insist beauty is not illegal. You adopt mascots. A dog that listens better than colonels, a cat that treats rats like personal projects. A pigeon, you name something grand like Sir Flapsalot, because dignity is a renewable resource. The mail matters so much it should have medals. Parcels arrive with socks, praise be, chocolate that shatters on cold mornings, newspapers that smell like home on damp, and knitted wear from societies of ladies who imagine you as a tidy hero and would faint at the reality of your socks. You write back, mindful of censors, describing the war as if it were weather. Bit chilly today, heavy showers. Fritz sent over some rain of his own. You don't mention the dead because there are not enough synonyms for fallen that don't sound like stairs. You mention the men by first name and last initial, as if by withholding the full name you can keep the man. You tuck in a pressed wildflower, stolen from the verge of a road that has suffered like everything else. Then there's jealousy and grudges, and the micropolitics of mud. Company A got dry socks earlier than Company B. Lance Corporal so-and-so manages to disappear every time there's a working party and reappear when there's tea. Someone's kit is suspiciously clean. Someone else writes too many letters and becomes an esoteric figure. Who, exactly, is he writing to? And does she have a friend? The cook has a fling with the quartermaster's favorite spoon, and suddenly the stew tastes of vengeance. Your corporal hates your boots on principle. The sniper hates your helmet specifically. The rats hate everyone equally, which is admirable in its own way. History insists it all mattered. The war is a machine fueled by coal, steel, and sentences, but the machine only runs because men in trenches keep getting up when whistles blow. The economy is ration cards, railways, and the knowledge that a pair of socks can be strategy. The state is not just generals, it's a private changing his socks because someone told him to, and because he has learned that the cost of disobedience is his foot. Valor isn't medals. It's the day you don't tell anyone you're scared because they're already carrying too much. Justice isn't a trial. It's sharing the last dry match. Absurdities flourish like mushrooms. A man gets a haircut during a bombardment because schedule is the last human right. Another plays a mouth organ at stand 2 and turns dawn into vaudeville. A carrier pigeon receives a citation for bravery and genuinely deserves it. A German shell lands in a trench called Shakespeare Avenue, and you note the irony while not being dead. A notice board goes up that says, "Any man found taking shelter in unauthorized dugouts will be punished," prompting the surreal reflection that there are authorized places to be. Exploded. You receive a pamphlet on proper salute technique and wonder if the pamphlet would enjoy frontline service. The support line gets a gramophone. You dance in boots that have seen worse. Somewhere, a general writes, "Objective, high ground," and you think, "Brother, the only high ground here is a crate." Your benefits package remains a rifle, a shovel, and mud. When the attack comes, you carry the rifle like a promise you wish you didn't have to keep. When the trench collapses, you dig with the shovel, like an archaeologist of the immediate past. When the day ends and you look down at boots that squelch like a philosophy, you realize mud is a country, and you have citizenship. The poet back home writes sonnets about glory. You write footnotes about drainage. They tell you the war will end by Christmas, then by spring, then by the hand of God if he checks his calendar. What actually ends it is the slow accumulation of ordinary decisions. Stand up, change socks, hold the line, share the cigarette, load the magazine, boil the tea, pull the wounded in, tie the letters with string. The enemy is not just a uniform, it's entropy. You beat it, sometimes, with organization, and sometimes with cheek. When it ends, whenever your ending arrives, you climb out of the trench and discover the world still has colors. Streets are not trenches, roofs are a thing, and rain falls and doesn't serve as a portent. You shake mud from your boots, and it is like shaking a language you have learned too well. And if scholars suggest anything about the meaning of all this, why it mattered, the grand lecture carved into bronze and gilt, it's that the modern world was not born in salons or parliaments alone, but in ditches where men discovered they could survive by committee. The telephone and the runner and the pigeon are a metaphor for the 21st century group chat. The creeping barrage is your synchronized calendar. The rum ration is the corporate wellness program that actually works. The lice are inbox notifications. The tank is the beta software that breaks often but sometimes gets you there. The trench is the cubicle with boundary issues. And the mud, always the mud, is the corporate culture that insists you be uncomfortable together so you can do something impossible. It's dark, yes, but the humor is the lamp you engineered from a jam tin and a bit of string. You, second-person protagonist of this overlong, underslept epic have done the ritual. Stand to, socks, tea, raids, letters, funerals, songs, rumors, ration lines, whispers, whistles. You've learned the scholarly vocabulary of survival, parapet, parados, traverse, sap, sapper, stand to, stand down, and you've paired it with slang that makes the whole enterprise human. You've met fear, shook its hand, and then refused to let it pick the playlist. You have become a small expert in drainage engineering, field cooking, first aid, inventory, meteorology, and comedy under pressure. A joke's kept you sane. A shovel kept you breathing. A rifle kept the story going, and the hope kept its promises. Here's your crisp exit line, polished by smoke and practice. The past isn't a foreign country, it's a trench with better Wi-Fi. For our second story tonight, imagine you are born into a world where your job description is essentially be decorative, be fertile, and under no circumstances break the empire. And then, against all odds, you manage to break the empire anyway. Congratulations. You are Czarina Alexandra, last Empress of Russia, patron saint of anxious overthinking, spiritual customer of every mystic within a 5,000-kilometer radius, and the woman who discovered that dynastic doom can, in fact, be a full-time hobby. From the outside, it looks glamorous. Jewels, palaces, Fabergé eggs that cost more than the gross domestic product of medium-sized countries. From the inside, it feels like this. You are trapped in a drafty, gold-plated anxiety attack with chandeliers. The empire is listing like a very expensive, very doomed cruise ship, and everyone expects you to smile, wave, and produce a male heir who does not spontaneously start bleeding when he bumps into furniture. This is the core tension of your life. You are supposed to embody divine stability, and yet everything about you is deeply, profoundly unstable. Your faith, your nerves, your body, your son's blood, your husband's spine. None of it is exactly screaming, solid investment. Modern comparison time. Imagine you marry a man who is technically the CEO of a vast, failing mega-corporation. He is sweet, earnest, and conflict-averse. You have paralyzing anxiety, a doom-heavy spiritual worldview, and a desperate need to micromanage everything. Now add peasants, pogroms, and the looming spectre of revolutionary collapse. Remove therapy, Wi-Fi, and antidepressants. Replace them with incense, icons, and a bearded mystic who looks like he would be banned from modern playgrounds on sight. What could possibly go wrong? Based on extensive archival snooping and using the highly advanced method known as reading stuff, historians have arrived at a consensus. Almost everything went wrong. A longitudinal study, also known as watching your life unfold in slow motion, indicates that every coping mechanism you chose was, at best, suboptimal, and, at worst, a controlled historical experiment in how not to run a collapsing autocracy. Controlled experiments were not, tragically, involved. Let us step into your life. You begin as Alex of Hesse, a shy, serious princess in a small German duchy where the carpets are neat, the Lutheran guilt is tidy, and the emotional repression is thick enough to spread on toast. The smells of your childhood are beeswax, polished wood, starch, and the faint odor of people trying very hard not to talk about feelings. You are close to your grandmother, Queen Victoria, the tiny imperial grandmother of Europe and part-time genetic menace. She has many grandchildren and, as rigorous historical analysis, also known as guesswork, suggests, She has gifted at least one branch of nearly every royal family with the delightful recessive gene for hemophilia. Your family dinners are like a silent game of who is going to bleed to death from a bruise first. You grow up pious, introverted, and somewhat brittle. You are not the girl who flirts at balls and flounces through salons. You are the girl who reads devotional literature and worries about how unworthy she is. A strictly non-scientific survey of your letters suggests that your major romantic interests are Jesus, melancholy, and being morally correct. And then there is Nicholas Romanov, Tsarevich, future Tsar. A soft-spoken, sweet, slightly bewildered man who loves you with the single-minded intensity of a golden retriever that has accidentally inherited a nuclear arsenal. He adores you. You adore him. Your cousin peers at this situation and quietly thinks, this seems emotionally adorable and politically catastrophic. You marry him anyway. Naturally. The wedding is grand, solemn, and uncomfortably haunted. The empire is already creaking. The peasants are not thriving. The workers in Petersburg are discovering that starvation plus factories equals radical ideas. The nobility are discovering that they enjoy French champagne more than responsibility. You are discovering that Russian orthodoxy smells like incense, wet wool, and mystical doom. You arrive in Russia and your job as Empress begins. Sensory notes, freezing air that cuts into your lungs, endless corridors that smell of candle wax and polished marble, servants moving like ghosts, priests chanting in deep, echoing bass voices that vibrate in your ribs. Everything is big, heavy, and male, gold, icons, eagles with two heads, as if the empire itself cannot decide where it is looking. You, meanwhile, are very clear on what you are looking at, the crushing expectation that you will produce a son, not just any son, a healthy son, a son who can inherit this tottering throne and not come with built-in spontaneous death potential. You produce daughters, one, then another, then another, then another. Lovely, intelligent girls with strong profiles and serious eyes. Each birth should be a celebration. Instead, each one is greeted by the court with the kind of disappointed politeness people reserve for holiday fruitcake. Oh, another girl. How charming. You could call it patriarchal disappointment, but really it is awkward silence. The gossip begins. Is the Empress cursed? Is she too foreign, too German, too Protestant in origin, too intense, too sickly, too something? You feel it, the judgment soaking into the wallpaper. Your shyness looks like arrogance. Your preference for quiet family life looks like snobbery. Your desire to keep Nicholas to yourself looks like manipulation. So you do what anxious, isolated people do in every century. You double down on the only things that make sense to you: God, family, and control. You redecorate your inner life with icons and prayers. You cling to Nicholas, who adores you but is also busy occasionally pretending to be an absolute monarch. You hover over your daughters with the intensity of a helicopter parent centuries before the invention of helicopters. A conservative estimate, pulled directly from thin air, would be that your baseline operating state is highly strung. Your heart palpitates, your nerves misfire. You are often in pain. Your body is a 19th century feedback loop of stress and fainting couches. And then, finally, your son is born. Alexei. He is small, cherished, desperately adored. When he is born, the empire exhales. Bells ring, cannons fire. People sob in the streets. Your arms ache with the weight of him. This tiny guarantee that everything you have suffered will be worth it. Then he bruises. and the bruise does not fade. You watch as a small knock turns into swelling, as swelling turns dark, as dark turns terrifying. His joints fill with blood. His cries rasp along your nerves like broken glass. Doctors come and go, murmuring and sweating. The phrase you never wanted to hear arrives: hemophilia. You know what this means. You have seen it in your uncles, in your cousins. The disease is a ghost that has whispered at the edges of your family stories, and now it has moved in and taken up residence in your nursery. Here is the mechanism of your daily terror, step by step. You wake up, and the first thing you do is listen. Is your son crying? Is he too quiet? Did he move wrong? Did he fall in the night? You walk into his room with the dread of someone inspecting a priceless glass sculpture that occasionally decides to bleed internally. You are always watching. His knees, his arms, his lips, the pallor of his skin. A small stumble on the yacht deck could mean days of agony. A carriage jolting over a rut could mean a joint filling with blood. A fall could mean death. No rough play, no running, no jumping. The heir to the Russian throne must be protected from the Russian floor. Your entire life becomes one long collision avoidance system. The methodology is robust, the people are not. The court does not fully understand. They see a fragile boy, an overprotective mother, a gloomy empress always whispering about God's will. They do not see you kneeling by a bed, night after night, listening to your child whimper, knowing that his blood does not know how to stop. Empirical evidence, also called vibes, implies that your mental health dives off a cliff around this time. You need hope, not political hope, not scientific hope, emotional, mystical. Please somebody fix this hope. So when someone whispers that there is a man, a holy man, a starets from Siberia who can help, you are primed. Your desperation is not just high, it is practically atmospheric. Enter Grigory Rasputin. If God and a bottle of cheap vodka had a problematic son, it would be this man. He arrives looking like a cross between an unwashed prophet and a one-man health code violation. He smells like travel, sweat, and the faint tang of someone who believes bathing insults the soul. His eyes, observers will later say, have a hypnotic quality. A strictly non-scientific survey of witnesses suggests that this hypnotic quality sits somewhere between deep spiritual presence and he is absolutely about to start a cult in your living room. You meet him. You are wary. Nobles are snickering behind sleeves. Priests are split between he is a holy fool and he is an actual demon. And then your son is sick again. Alexei is dying. At least it feels that way. He is having one of his catastrophic bleeds. Doctors have done their usual repertoire. Concerned faces, hand-wringing, opium, suggestions that everyone should prepare themselves. Rasputin is summoned. He prays. He speaks softly. He tells you to stop all the medical treatments, to trust God, to leave the boy alone. Somewhere in there, he probably implies that conventional medicine is an overhyped scam, as every self-respecting mystic does. And then, the impossible happens. The boy improves. The bleeding stops. Modern historians, wielding things like clotting factor theories and an understanding of aspirin, will suggest several possible reasons. Maybe the doctors had been giving aspirin, which thins the blood, and stopping it allowed natural clotting. Maybe the boy simply turned the corner on his own. Maybe Rasputin's calm presence reduced the emotional hysteria in the room and made the crisis less chaotic. Whatever the mechanism, the outcome is the same. Your son lives, and the bearded man from Siberia was there when he did. Subsequent research has confirmed that, yes, this is the moment everything gets worse. Because now, in your mind, Rasputin is not merely a wandering holy man with poor hygiene. He is a lifeline. He is the one person who can reach into the darkness of your terror and pull your child back. From this point forward, your relationship with him becomes the axis around which your private world spins. You write him letters that read like love notes to a prophet, and panic DMs to your therapist rolled into one. You sign them with spiritual endearments. You beg him to pray for Nikki, for Alexei, for Russia. You tell him he is your friend, your father, your holy man, your all. Historians have debated endlessly whether this relationship was sexual, emotional, spiritual, or some ungainly hybrid. A strictly non-scientific survey of the sources suggests it was mostly spiritual dependence and emotional drowning, with just enough innuendo and gossip to keep the entire Petersburg aristocracy drunk on scandal. They whisper that you are sleeping with him. They whisper that your daughters are sleeping with him. They whisper that he is controlling state policy, foreign affairs, the army, the weather. Do you invite this man into the heart of the court? Yes. Do you insist he has a special insight into God's will? Also, yes. Do you think this will reassure a nervous, conservative aristocracy that already hates your foreign face and your private piety? Absolutely not. But remember our running gag. This is the part where you definitely do not panic. So instead of panicking, you double down. Again. Every new crisis, every new hemorrhage, every new political protest, your answer is the same. More prayer, more isolation, more Rasputin. Let us zoom out for a moment and look at the broader system you are inadvertently helping to crash. Russia at this time is, technically speaking, a mess. The peasants are living in what economists would delicately call unfavorable conditions. There are famines. There are strikes. There are revolutionary pamphlets circulating like edgy zines, except instead of promoting indie bands, they promote the overthrow of your husband. Your husband, Nicholas, is constitutionally unsuited to be an autocrat. He wants to be a family man who chops wood, reads reports, and is loved by everyone. Instead, his job requires him to be terrifying. He specializes in not being terrifying. Preliminary findings indicate that this is a terrible idea. You, on the other hand, are very good at being terrifying, at least from the outside. You believe in the divine right of kings, the way modern influencers believe in engagement metrics. You are absolutely sure that yielding power would be a betrayal of God's plan. So, when revolutionaries demand a constitution, your position is essentially, no, because Jesus. You produce pamphlets with your eyes. You glare. You remind Nicholas that his coronation oath was before God, not Parliament. You frame every concession as moral cowardice. This is the dynamic, a gentleman torn between love for his wife and a vague sense that maybe shooting protesters is not great, and a deeply anxious wife who copes with chaos by clinging harder to absolute authority and prayer. Peer review in this case meant "my cousin agrees" is replaced by "my confessor agrees," and Rasputin says we must hold firm. Speaking of shooting protesters, let us talk about the Bloody Sunday incident, when peaceful demonstrators came to petition their little father and were met with gunfire. You are not there personally, but you live with the fallout. The people's faith in the monarch collapses like a badly built stage set. The myth of the kindly Tsar shatters. You respond by retreating further into the palace, further into prayer, further into the belief that suffering is proof you are on the right path. From a modern perspective, this is the emotional equivalent of responding to a public relations disaster by throwing your phone into a lake and then only consulting the opinion of your horoscope and that one friend who always says, "You are doing amazing, sweetie." Inside the palace, daily life is a strange hybrid of domestic sweetness and apocalyptic dread. You have moments of real warmth, reading to your children, sewing, listening to music. You insist on family dinners, simple clothes at home, doing your daughter's hair. There is love here. There is tenderness. There is also the oppressive knowledge that your son might die at any moment, and that the empire might fall at any moment, and that both of these things will be your fault. Every squeal of laughter from Alexei is edged with fear. What if he falls? Every cough becomes a prophecy. Every time a minister resigns, every time a protest erupts, you see the hand of God testing you. Your spiritual practices intensify. You attend long, exhausting services, kneeling, crossing yourself, muttering prayers. You collect icons the way some people collect houseplants. You write in your diary as though you are leaving a transcript for God's internal audit. Data collection methods in this period are, at best, improvisational. Your feelings, your priest's advice, Rasputin's letters. All available data, plus some speculation, point to the same conclusion. Hold on, trust God, distrust everyone else. The séances and spiritualism swirling around you are not unique to you. This is an era when the upper classes throughout Europe are extremely bored and have discovered that nothing spices up an evening like talking to the dead. Parlors fill with candle smoke and people clutching little tables that mysteriously wobble as Great-Aunt Olga allegedly sends messages from beyond. For you, however, this is not a parlor game. This is survival. You fall into a broader Russian tradition of mysticism, holy fools, visions, and private revelation. You are, in a way, the ultimate customer in a spiritual marketplace. Anxious, powerful, isolated, willing to pay any price for reassurance. And so your court becomes a magnet for the weird. Pilgrims, visionaries, dubious nuns, pious ladies with intense eyes and more opinions than sense. Everyone wants in. Everyone has a prophecy or a prayer or a technique. Some bring miraculous icons. Some bring candles that allegedly burned near a saint. Some bring rumors. The palace, which should function like a bureaucratic machine, functions more like a haunted group chat. Information moves not in neat memos but in whispers, confessions, and pious gossip. The ministers outside this inner circle are furious. They see state decisions being influenced by this chaotic swirl of spiritual advisors and, most of all, by Rasputin. Rasputin, meanwhile, is living his best and worst life. He is a peasant who has become intimate with the imperial family. He moves between holy man and scandal machine with alarming ease. He prays with you and then goes out drinking with ladies of questionable reputation. His alleged antics in Petersburg brothels provide endless material for tabloids. A strictly non-scientific survey of the surviving rumors suggests that Rasputin's hobbies include drinking, boasting, grabbing women, and saying things like, "Sin brings us closer to God if we repent afterward," which is the spiritual equivalent of saying, "Calories do not count on weekends." The contrast is sharp. While he chants prayers over your son, elsewhere he behaves like an unsupervised Dickens character who took a wrong turn and ended up in the wrong novel. If Dickens was the last person you wanted at Christmas dinner, Rasputin is the last person you want as your unofficial co-therapist and public face of mystical policy. Yet whenever someone tries to warn you, you see only this. When your boy screams in pain, Rasputin prays, and sometimes the pain lessens. In your lived experience, that is not theory, that is survival data. So you protect him. When nobles plot against him, you are outraged. When ministers complain, you dismiss them. You and Nicholas exile critics, shuffle governments, and cling to this one deeply problematic lifeline. The more the world attacks Rasputin, the more you take it personally. It feels like an attack on your son, on your faith, on the fragile little bubble of meaning you have constructed to survive. From a distance, it looks insane. From the inside, it feels like this is the part where you definitely do not panic, so you cling harder to the one thing that has ever worked. Then comes the First World War, because obviously what a fragile autocracy held together by prayer and vibes really needs is a giant, industrialized meat grinder of a conflict. War erupts. You urge Nicholas to be firm, to stand by his allies, to trust in God and bayonets. The army marches. At first, people cheer, as they always do. Flags, hymns, naive speeches about glory. Then the casualties mount. The supplies falter. The logistical system collapses under the weight of modern warfare and old incompetence. Soldiers freeze, starve, and die in trenches that smell of mud, blood, and bad decisions. At home, food shortages hit the cities. Wives and mothers line up for bread that often does not arrive. Factories grind and belch. Workers grow more militant. And you, Empress Alexandra, become regent when Nicholas, in an astonishing feat of miscalculation, decides to personally command the army at the front, leaving you effectively in charge of the capital. Let us pause to appreciate this move. Nicholas, a man with no military genius to speak of, leaves the capital to lead a modern war he does not really understand. You, a deeply unpopular, foreign-born empress with no political training and severe anxiety, are left to manage domestic governance in a time of crisis, leaning heavily on a disreputable holy man. Preliminary findings indicate that this is still a terrible idea. Subsequent research has confirmed that, yes, it got even worse. Your regency is a masterclass in how good intentions, religious intensity, and catastrophic judgment can combine into a single, nation-shaking phenomenon. You shuffle ministers constantly, convinced that each departure will finally rid you of weak or treacherous men. You see conspiracies everywhere. Anyone who opposes Rasputin must be an enemy of the throne. You value loyalty over competence, piety over policy. The Duma, the elected legislative body, fumes. Nobles mutter. Rumors multiply. People talk not just about the German woman, but about the German woman and her holy devil. Caricatures circulate, showing you and Rasputin ruling Russia together. You in a feverish trance, he leering, his beard doubling as a constitutional crisis. You do not see these cartoons, or if you do, you dismiss them as slanders. You tell yourself that suffering is proof that you are on the narrow path. Your letters to Nicholas during this period are a mix of pep talks, spiritual manifestos, and frantic updates. Trust God, trust me, distrust everybody else. You lean on your running gag. This is the part where you definitely do not panic. And in order to not panic, you simply retreat further into the one reality you can control. Your faith, your family, your holy man. The assassination of Rasputin in Petrograd is, in many ways, the last dramatic episode in your long, terrible experiment with hope. A group of noble conspirators, convinced that killing him will save the monarchy, lure him to a palace, attempt to poison him, shoot him, beat him, and finally drown him. The exact details vary depending on who is telling the story and how drunk they are. The consistent point is, he dies, very messily, and the conspirators feel that they have done something noble. You do not feel this way. You are devastated. For you, this is not the removal of a cancer. It is the murder of a friend, a spiritual father, the one man you believed could save your son. Where the conspirators see a necessary surgery, you see a crucifixion. Now, with the war going badly, the economy crumbling, and your holy man dead, there is very little left holding your internal world together. The revolution that follows feels, from your perspective, both shocking and somehow inevitable. Like an earthquake in a house where the walls have been silently cracking for years. Strikes, demonstrations, mutinies. Soldiers refuse to fire on crowds. Ministers resign or vanish. Messages blur into one another. The streets of Petrograd are filled with smoke, banners, and the sound of people suddenly realizing that they can yell at centuries of autocracy out loud. Nicholas abdicates. The Romanov autocracy collapses with a dull, exhausted thud. The thing everyone thought was eternal, ordained by God, and as solid as the winter ice is gone in a matter of days. And you are no longer an empress. You are a sick, exhausted woman in a house under guard, surrounded by your children, waiting to see what happens next. The silence of your despair now is different. Before, it was the silence of a woman who cannot scream because she is too busy praying. Now, it is the silence of someone who has screamed internally for so long that there is nothing left but ringing. In captivity, you cling even more tightly to your faith. Icons, prayers, Bible readings. You write in your diary with the same earnestness as before, as if all of this is still part of some divine plan you will eventually understand. Your body breaks down. Years of stress, heart problems, and physical weakness catch up with you. Your health, never robust, becomes fragile. Your daughters help nurse you. They are young, pale, and brave. Their lives contracted from balls and palaces to chores and confinement. Alexei, your boy, grows thinner, more solemn. His hemophilia does not go away just because the empire did. Every move is still dangerous. Every step, still a negotiation with his own blood. The family is moved and moved again, each time to a smaller, more controlled space. Your world narrows to rooms that smell of damp wood, old furniture, and the faint medicinal tang of iodine and carbolic. The sounds are guards' boots, muttered orders, the soft clink of dishes. Outside, war, revolution, and civil conflict are tearing Russia apart. Factions rise and fall. Armies march and retreat. Ideologies clash in pamphlets and on battlefields. These vast movements of history reach you filtered through rumors and occasional newspapers, like echoes of a storm outside a locked cellar. Inside, your days are marked by small rituals, prayer, reading, needlework, family conversations, occasional visits from priests, from officials. The children play, study, and brood. You worry, because worrying is the one thing nobody can take from you. When the end comes, it comes as another transfer, another move, another reassurance that this is temporary. Historians will debate whether you suspected what was truly happening. Some evidence suggests you retained, up to the end, a faint, stubborn belief that you might be exiled to England or somewhere distant but survivable. But the final moments in that basement in Ekaterinburg are, in the historical record, a blur of shots, screams, chaos, and thick smoke. There is no elegant fade-out. There is no cinematic dignity. It is brutal, confused, and ugly. The sensory details, drawn from later testimonies, are mundane and horrific. The smell of gunpowder in a small room, the thud of bodies, the crack of bullets hitting walls, the strange muffling effect of jewels sewn into corsets, acting briefly as armor before failing. This is what the end of a dynasty sounds like. Not trumpets, not choirs, just men yelling and weapons misfiring in an improvised execution. Afterward, the bodies are disposed of in a manner that would make any self-respecting undertaker file a complaint with the universe. The Romanovs vanish into shallow graves and acid, rumors and legends. For decades, the details of your death are obscured, distorted, denied. Your life, of course, does not end there in the historical imagination. It continues as myth. For monarchists and devotees, you become a martyred empress, a saintly sufferer who bore her sorrows with Christian patience. Icons are painted with your face. Stories are told of your piety, your endurance, your motherly love. For critics, you remain the anxious, foreign fanatic whose blind faith in autocracy, mysticism, and a questionable holy man helped push a tottering empire over the edge. A cautionary tale in a tiara. Modern scholarship, using the highly advanced method known as reading stuff and trying not to be dramatic, has tended toward a more nuanced view. You were not a cartoon villain. You were not a flawless saint. You were a deeply wounded, chronically ill, spiritually intense woman, trapped in a role that demanded inhuman calm and inhuman wisdom, neither of which you possessed. Your silent despair was not romantic. It was the grinding, day-to-day terror of a mother of a sick child, a wife of a weak ruler, and a believer in a God who seemed to demand ever more sacrifices without clear explanations. If you strip away the jewels and the incense, what remains is startlingly relatable. You feared for your child's life. You tried everything, including things that look ridiculous in hindsight. You clung to the people who made you feel less helpless, even when everyone else could see they were terrible choices. You doubled down instead of backing off. You spiritualized your trauma because that was the only language available to you. You did what a lot of humans do, only your mistakes had an empire attached. So where does that leave us in the quiet epilogue? In modern terms, you are what happens when untreated anxiety, inherited guilt, religious absolutism, and catastrophic political stakes collide. The running gag of your life. This is the part where you definitely do not panic, plays right through to the end, because you never permitted yourself to panic outwardly. You just let it calcify inwardly into rigidity. The crushing weight of dynastic doom is not just some poetic phrase historians toss around for book titles. It is what sits in your chest every morning, what rumbles in your prayer, what echoes in every choice you make. And, if we are being uncomfortably honest, it is not entirely alien to now. People today may not have crowns or holy fools in their group chats, but they do live under quieter dynastic expectations, family scripts, cultural stories, pressures to hold everything together at any cost. They respond with their own versions of what you did. More control, more rituals, more clinging to anything that promises certainty. Whether that is a wellness guru, a conspiracy theory, or a charismatic influencer who talks like Rasputin but wears better shampoo. All available data, plus some speculation, point to this conclusion. You were not uniquely monstrous or uniquely holy. You were uniquely positioned for your particular catastrophe. So, picture yourself again as Alexandra. The candles, the icons, the aching back, the fluttering heart, the child who might die from a bruise. The husband who cannot say no to anyone except the people he actually should. The empire groaning outside your windows. You kneel. You cross yourself. You murmur, not for the first time, that all of this must have meaning, that God would not allow such suffering without a plan. And somewhere, in the future, a historian sits in the dark, coffee going cold, watching this like a very long, very slow disaster movie. The right term might be tragedy, but the actual term is lesson. A longitudinal study, also known as you watching this unfold in slow motion, suggests that absolute certainty plus absolute power plus absolute fear is a combination best avoided. Your story does not end with redemption or with neat justice. It ends with a basement and a firing squad, but it continues as a warning. Do not wait for a Rasputin to fix what needs real help. Do not confuse suffering with virtue. And maybe, just maybe, when you hear that little voice saying, "This is the part where you definitely do not panic," consider that a mild, grounded, non-apocalyptic level of panic might, in fact, be the scientifically recommended option. Because in the end, the last Empress of Russia was not destroyed by one bad decision, one evil man, or one recessive gene. She was destroyed by a whole system in which nobody could say, "This is not working, let us change it," without risking everything. You, watching from the safe distance of a different century, get the one crisp line of comfort she never did. You can set down weights that are crushing you, even if those weights look sacred. Crowns, expectations, dynastic doom, or just the stories you tell yourself about what you must be. Alexandra never got to do that. You do.